UN News.
Yesterday was October 7th, which marks 2 years of the live stream genocide that Israel has committed. So I definitely wanted to make sure that we, did some remembering of what happened then. But this is from Andy Worthington, who writes 2 years of Israel's genocide in Gaza, a sickening, unbridled enthusiasm for extermination that shames the world. So the world as we know it died 2 years ago today on October 7th, 2023, but not as we've been incessantly bludgeoned into believing, because Palestinian resistance fighters who broke out of the open-air prison of the Gaza Strip went on a killing spree in southern Israel in a desperate response to 75 years of persistent oppression, apartheid, and murder by the state of Israel. Those attacks, horrific as they were, with 1,195 people killed and 251 others taken hostage, although it should be noted that no one knows how many were killed by Israeli forces themselves under the notorious Hannibal Directive, were portrayed by Israel as a genocide and as an existential threat to their very existence by subhuman monsters, but that was clearly untrue. And I'll also add that, they probably let that happen. They knew something was up. So, but in the long history of oppression and resistance since the blood-soaked founding of the State of Israel in 1948, when 15,000 Palestinians were killed and over 700,000 driven from their homes and permanently exiled, many, many times more Palestinians than Israelis have been killed in repeated one-sided wars on Gaza, euphemistically and unforgivably described by the Israeli authorities as, quote, mowing the lawn, or have been killed in random executions, often for nothing more than throwing stones at soldiers, while at any given time, at least 5,000 Palestinians, including children, have been held in brutal prisons, reserved solely for Palestinians, in which any kind of internationally recognized due process and justice have been deliberately erased. The blunt truth is that in response to the attacks on October 7th, it is Israel itself that has been engaged in a genocide, as recognized most recently by an authoritative UN Commission of Inquiry, posing a demonstrably real existential threat to the very existence of the Palestinians, executed with such grotesque and sustained sadistic violence that it is the Israelis themselves who have been revealed as the truly barbaric monsters. So, yeah. So we'll also kind of a good refresher course from Caitlin Johnstone. We'll let Tim Foley read her words.
Everything before and after October 7th explains why October 7th happened. Everything before October 7th explains why October 7th happened, and so does everything that's happened since. Look at what happened before October 7th, and you'll see year after year of murder, oppression, and abuse. Look at everything that's happened since October 7th, and you'll understand the kind of sadistic, psychopathic regime the Palestinians have been living under this entire time. Israel supporters don't want you looking at what happened before October 7th, and they don't want you looking at anything that's happened since. They just want you to pretend history began and ended with a bunch of Hitlerite savages attacking innocent Jews for no reason. And they don't even want you looking at the day of October 7th too closely either. Looking too closely at the events of that day bring up inconvenient questions about the Hannibal Directive and what percentage of the death toll was actually caused by the IDF firing on their own people. Inconvenient questions about the suspicious stock trading in the lead up to the attack, and the mountains upon mountains upon mountains of evidence that high-level Israeli officials allowed the attack to proceed undefended in order to advance the genocidal land grab we are seeing advanced now. They only want you looking at the parts of October 7th that make Israel look like an innocent little lamb who was attacked completely out of the blue and had no choice but to reluctantly respond with military force. Forget the scorched earth incineration of the Gaza Strip. Forget the bombed-out hospitals and methodically dismantled healthcare system. Forget the hundreds upon hundreds of Palestinians in Gaza who've been deliberately starved to death. Forget the fact that every relevant human rights institution on Earth has determined that Israel is committing genocide, and that 0 comparable humanitarian institutions have said it isn't. Forget the fact that human rights experts have been describing Gaza as a giant concentration camp or open-air prison for years prior to October 7th, forget the fact that Israel had been routinely murdering Palestinian children and other civilians in the months prior to the Hamas attack. Don't look at any of that stuff. Just look at the stuff that makes Israel look like the victim. That's the story, anyway. Luckily, fewer and fewer people are buying into it. The longer this genocide goes on for, the more the world has come to view October 7th as Israel reaping what it had long been sowing.
Agreed.
Okay.
Yep. So, I mean, I remember covering what happened specifically 2 years ago. Me and y'all can go back, and then we covered how, people were asking it to be condemned. We talked about that, as did other people on our network, which got our network permanently demonetized. So
Right.
That was 2 years ago. Now it's pretty much everyone kind of knows that what happened. So, Fiorella Isabel, 2 years since October 7th, video footage proved Israeli fired on its own citizens to blame Hamas, enacting the Hannibal Directive, which it used to build the now destroyed narrative that Hamas killed festival goers and beheaded babies, using this as an excuse for their genocide. So, she's again talking about how leaked footage from Israeli Air Force shows IDF Apache helicopters firing at its own citizens at Supernova Music Festival on October 7th. Right? Pilots realized that there was tremendous difficulty in distinguishing within the occupied outposts and settlements who was a terrorist and who was a soldier or a civilian. The rate of fire against the thousands of terrorists was tremendous at first, and only at a certain point did the pilots begin to slow down the attacks and carefully select the targets. Middle East Eye at Vanessa Beeley. So, yep, pretty accurate reporting there. Again, tomorrow is October 7th, which yesterday for us at time of recording.
That's it.
So it's a great time to remind you all that Israel killed most of the Jews during the biggest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. Right? And he reports this 28 fighter helicopters shot over the course of the day all of the ammunition in their bellies in renewed runs to rearm. We are talking about hundreds of 30 millimeter cannon mortars and Hellfire missiles. Right? So Sam Husseini Israeli falsely claimed Hamas slaughtered babies so it could actually slaughter babies. On October 18th, 2023, the Intifada, great thread. I'll try to remember to put the thread in the description below when we do the clips, which I will link in chat here in a moment. But this is literally Intifada put together all their coverage of it over the last 2 years, and people should definitely go check that out. I will open my speaker notes where the link is saved. Come on. There we go. But if I just copy link here, there we go. Yeah, that. Cool. And that goes in chat for people. Look at you. So great thread from them. People should go check that out. Another great thread that I will link in chat as well is from Zay Squirrel, who put together a lot of the testimonies from the hostages, right? And people that actually experienced it. Right? An Israeli woman's testimony of what happened to her on October 7th. They come in and I tell them I have 2 children. They say, don't worry, we're Muslim. We will not hurt you. One of them sees bananas and asks if he can have one. I say, yes. They stayed about 2 hours, then left. Right? Israeli reporter asked a woman released in the exchange why she turned around and shook the hand of the Hamas person. She said they treated us gently and they provided for all our needs. They prepared for it and had all the things women need. Then they immediately cut her off. Right? Again, another testimony from an Israeli girl and woman released in the exchange. He brought a towel because he is not allowed to touch me. A woman is a saint there. A woman is a queen. Right? So, again, that bit of propaganda fall flat for Israel yet again. So Zachary Foster, October 7th was not the deadliest attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. First, it was not the deadliest. That would be the anti-Jewish Argentinian junta's mass murder of thousands of Jews In the late 1970s and early 1980s, the campaign was, wait for it, enabled by Israeli arms exports to Argentina, which constituted 30% of Israel's arms export during this period, making the anti-Semitic junta a key strategic ally of Israel. Second, it was not an attack on Jewish people. Jewish people weren't targeted on October 7th. Israel was targeted. In fact, Palestinian fighters, together with the Israeli military when instituted the Hannibal Directive, killed 149 non-Jews on October 7th. Everyone telling you they attacked the Jewish people is urinating on the graves of the Palestinian and other non-Jewish victims. Why Israeli slaves in the U.S. Congress feel the need to regurgitate lies, even when there are plenty of horrifying and truthful things that could be said about Hamas that day, goes to show just how enslaved our elected representatives and their masters in AIPAC, Kufi, and Tel Aviv. And again, you got to go out of your way to be like Hamas did horrible things even in your post. So,
right.
You know, like, you don't know that. Nobody knows that shit. To this day, it is still difficult to find reporting in U.S. mainstream media on Israel's intentional targeting of Israeli civilians on October 7th, 2023, when it implemented the Hannibal Directive, an excellent thread with receipts. Again, I've linked that in the chat, as well as the other thread from Zay Squirrel. This one, hold on. I go back. This one. Make sure I link that for people in chat. Cool. So there's that. And I thought it also reminded me, you know, they talked about, I've heard that, you know, don't call October 7th an attack when it's really a prison break, you know? Like which was the mission initially, was to get people out of Israeli prisons. Right, as well as escaping the open air prison that they exist under. But I felt like this scene fits very well here. So it's from the Battle of Algiers, right? I don't know if you've seen that film. But it really shows the hypocrisy of imperialism. On many occasions, the FLN did not carry out bomb attacks against French settlers, but it was a fraction compared to the 1 million Algerians who died in the war, mostly civilians. So I'll let the scene speak for itself, but come on, go back, play the video. Thank you very much. So there it is. That's what I was looking for. Isn't it cowardly to use your women's baskets to carry bombs which have taken so many innocent lives? Isn't it even more cowardly to attack defensive villages with napalm bombs that kill many thousands of times more? Obviously, planes would make things easier for us. Give us your bombers, sir, and you can have our baskets. So, I feel like it applies pretty one for one there, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and same thing with the Viet Cong and all that other stuff. It's what we've done thousands of times to indigenous groups of people, you know, and then we call them barbaric, you know. So, yeah. But,
well, anyone for that color, for that matter.
Well, yeah. So this is from Mondo Weiss, and I found it very interesting, right? So they write, Remembering to Forget October 7th, which is an interesting title. You know?
Yeah.
So you'll realize why in a second. So 2 years on, the memory of October 7th returns as both catastrophe and possibility, reminding us that both resistance and surrender are choices haunted by loss. But 2 years on, we also learned something else. They are defeatable. This morning, the Israeli army entered Al-Baray in the heart of Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Not because it needed to, but because it had to. Shots fired, young men rounded up, herded into the school building called Al-Mughtaribin, the exiles. How language conspires with history. Exile gathers them even in naming. The reason the army was there had far less to do with security objectives than it did with the date. October 7th. swollen with the repetition of massacres, but this time refusing to fall nearly into the ritual of the routine. The date compelled the army to act, not from strategy, but from the need to make us forget that day. And perhaps, ironically, they needed to remind us to erase it from memory. The morning's operation was meant to shock, but it ended up folding itself into the long archive of mornings already witnessed. Everything about it was ritualistic: the boots, the radios, the rifles tilted just so. It fails to shock precisely because it is constantly shocking. To mention October 7th before a fragilely assembled assembly of uniformed men, their bodies stiff with authority and fatigue, it is tempt their compulsion to humiliate, maim, and kill. The date itself becomes a trigger, the word too heavy for their weapons not to answer. The joke today is simple. If you are stopped at a checkpoint and the uniformed men ask for the date with that characteristic boredom that carries a silent threat, answer creatively. Give the date from the Islamic calendar. Offer the date from the Jewish calendar. Invent another year entirely. Anything but that day, you must expel it from your utterance. We have come to understand that neither resistance nor surrender will necessarily lead to salvation. All resistance offers is a chance that life might continue, even if only in fragments. Surrender, by contrast, erases what remains. This is the logic of a society so powerful that a single number can trigger its humiliation. They have the law, the armored vehicles, the patronage of imperial powers, and yet they are unable to muster the modesty to listen to a word. Their transgressions against our bodies, our lives, our future, they are all enacted precisely where language becomes forbidden, where a date can be treated as contraband. 2 years on, the date itself triggers violence and forces their compulsion. It has become a joke, one that reveals how darkness can unexpectedly twist into laughter. At first sight, the joke, don't say October 7th, give them any other date, appears as a tactic of survival, a small strategy of deception in the face of arbitrary violence. Yet, as with all jokes, the truth lies not in its surface, but in its structure. What does it mean to remember to forget? To discipline oneself never to utter the date. The effort to expel October 7th from speech makes it unforgettable. To forget it properly, you would have to stop guarding your tongue. You would have to stop constructing elaborate detours, Islamic calendar, Jewish calendar, invented numbers, but the fact that you cannot simply let it go proves that the date is lodged in the unconscious. Ironically, obscenely, the Israeli insistence makes forgetting impossible. Through every operation, every checkpoint, every ritual of domination, they become the guardians of the date. It is they who rehearse it endlessly, paradoxically ensuring its presence. We have also learned something, and this is perhaps the most important lesson. They are defeatable. They have destroyed Gaza, bulldozed its buildings, killed its possibility for life, and yet they cannot kill the date. Material devastation is absolute, and still the number persists. The more complete the destruction, the more spectral the date becomes, like a residue that resists extermination. And as we learn to forget, staging the rituals of contrition, we, those pressed beneath their boots, become unwilling archivists, custodians of what must not be spoken. In silence, memory calcifies. In avoidance, preservation, the refuse to utter October 7th becomes its most rigorous citation. I am not sure how historians will look back on this date, perhaps as the beginning of the spiral into monstrosity and the hyper-forms of techno-fascism that feed on rubble and displaced flesh. Or perhaps as the first cracks in an imperial judgment and its outpost, the sign of the end of their imagined permanence. And perhaps as our end, our bodies scattered, dispersed, maimed beyond recognition, and maybe as something else, the endurance of the unbearable, the persistence of what was meant to be erased, the resurrection of a people who refused to vanish. I am not sure. The uncertainty is itself the symptom of the interval. To be sure is to argue for inevitabilities, but here nothing is settled. The questions remain open, as does the genocide. The open wounds of Palestine do not close, they spiral. Thoughts, Care Bear?
Make it stop.
Agreed, dude.
Really, I mean, really, at this point, what else is there to say? But just make it stop. Like, we're
Yeah.
tired. We're tired of seeing the images and the videos on social media. We're tired of this country going to bat for a country that is not acting at all in good faith towards the Palestinians. Just stop so people can heal and rebuild if they choose to, but I, I'm just kind of over it. Been over it, and then like
Yeah.
how the Zionist lobby is kind of doubling down on the idea of stuff is what it started on when it's not.
Right.
It's not. Stop it. Like, I don't know. Yeah, just
Well, to me, our one of our jobs now is to make sure that this aspect of things isn't forgotten, because it usually very quickly
right.
is. The last times these have happened in Palestine, people just conveniently forget and go on about their day. But y'all make sure people fucking remember, because that's when we're going to see the opportunities to act on this, is after they think you've forgotten. So, unfortunately, we have to do everything fucking post hoc, So, but just as a reminder, the U.S. spent over $31 billion aiding Israel in the past 2 years. The Cost of War Project at Brown University calculated that the total U.S. military support to Israel over the past 2 years has cost U.S. taxpayers over $30 billion. Israel has received over $21 billion in military aid from the U.S. and Washington, has bombed Iran and Yemen for Tel Aviv. President Trump also joined Tel Aviv's aggressive war against Iran and intercepted missiles targeting Israel. Overall, the U.S. has spent between 10 and 13 billion helping Israel wage wars across the Middle East over the past 2 years. The author of the Cost of War study, William Hartung, notes that it only calculates the weapons that have been delivered to Israel and does not include weapons that the U.S. has promised to deliver to Israel in the future. Last month, the White House approved a $6 billion arms sale to Israel that will be paid for with the U.S. military aid. Washington has promised to provide Israel with at least $3.8 billion in annual military assistance. After Israel started the onslaught in Gaza, the U.S. approved an additional $14 billion in military aid for Israel. So I don't think people have been upset enough, Like, we are wholly complicit in everything, So, yeah. But I'll end with this. This is from In Context over there with Mr. Medhurst, I do believe. But we'll let this video play us out. Here we go.
The genocide of the Palestinians is a mark of shame on the modern so-called moral order. This is not 2 years of history waiting to be buried. It is still bleeding. This is about what remains of Gaza and what the world must never forget. In Gaza, neighbourhoods lie flattened, streets unwalkable, shelters overcrowded. In Khan Yunis, entire blocks turned into ghosts. In northern Gaza, hospitals overwhelmed, electricity cut, water contaminated. Families huddle in tents that leak rain, living in the smell of their dead. There is no combat zone left, only civilians trapped, confined, crushed. Medical staff are not shields. They are the last line against extinction. Countless senior physicians have been killed or detained since October the 7th, 2023. A scale of loss that collapses any hope of functioning hospitals. Operating theatres darkened, ICU wards emptied, ambulances struck, corridors turned into morgues, field hospitals made of tents bombed. The silence after a blast is the cry of a world that failed. This is the deadliest war for journalists ever recorded. At least 232 journalists have been killed in Gaza, more than in the world wars, Vietnam, Yugoslavia, and Afghanistan combined in a shorter span. CPJ counts 178 journalists killed, 176 of them Palestinian. Other sources put the total above 270 media workers slain. On August 10th, Al Jazeera's Anas al-Sharif was killed. colleagues say his reporting made him a target. At NASA Medical Complex, a double-tap strike killed 5 journalists, among dozens of medical staff in the hospital itself. These deaths are not accidents. They were deliberate. They are messages. Look, but do not speak. When the press dies, so does the witness. The flotilla remains a beacon. Ships of activists, medics, aid workers defying the siege. They sail towards Gaza, carrying water, medicine, cameras, and conviction. Each intercepted vessel forces the world to see the blockade, to confront the silence. Across capitals, youth march. Universities rally. Artists carve Gaza into murals. In every city, the slogan returns. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Not as provocation, as a statement of life, affirmation of rights, of resistance. Now the world debates installing Tony Blair as Gaza's post-war governor. To millions, Blair is not a peace broker. He is a war criminal. His legacy in Iraq haunts him. His record in the Middle East is stained by blood. Put simply, Palestinians do not need a British war criminal to govern them. Blair as overseer is not stabilisation. It's neo-colonial theatre. It signals that even after mass slaughter, foreign hands still reach for control. Marking 2 years since October the 7th demands more than a memorial, but a provocation to conscience, a call to action, a renewal of resilience. Let those hospitals, those homes, those faces be demands. Why wasn't help allowed in? Why are killers unpunished? Why is Gaza treated as if human lives there do not matter? Every name of every doctor, of journalist, of every child must be spoken in every protest, in every hall of power. The wound of October the 7th is open. Silence now is not peace. Solidarity is a torch. Speak, resist, with whatever means you have. Opposing state criminalization of those calling out genocide is the battle of our time and a moral duty. For Gaza, for justice.
Well, that's all I got. Anything you wanted to add?
No. Just sad.
Really is, dude. And talking about it specifically is why our channel got demonetized. So if you would like to help us monetarily and help us continue to cover the most important issues of our time, feel free to scan that QR code on your screen or go to ko-fi.com/Indie News Network. Links to help are always in the description below. But, you know, otherwise, just like and subscribe. Hit the share button, send this to your friends, and leave a comment. Let us know what you think. Otherwise, thanks for watching.